So, our discipleship class now is entering lesson 7, and lesson 7 is the big question of why does God allow suffering, the problem of pain in this world. And as a way to introduce the lesson and to try to build relationship and community, I feel like God has been calling me to allow you to enter into my pain. And so I'm going to be sharing with you the most painful and most profound experience in my life thus far, and that is the death of my son. Most of you know that I have 5 children that I'm raising, but I actually have 6 children. And in 2003, my infant son died. Now, I have grown up in a very comfortable environment. I was a loved child, a 5th child. My family took care of me. I didn't see a lot of pain or suffering. I tended to have the kind of life where it seems like everything was pretty good, pretty easy. We always had enough. And so I had a really positive outlook. I was always like, oh, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. I'm sure that something's going to be working out. And I was raised in the church, and I was raised by parents who loved God. And so I knew about God, and I loved God. I had a what I thought was a good faith, but it was an untested faith because, like I said, there wasn't really anything terribly difficult that I had had to go through before Max. We had a lot happening that year. We had just moved from our house in the city to a house in the country. My daughter Clara was still a child, less than 2 years old. She was 18 months old, so we were still dealing with younger children, and all of the boxes were still unpacked when I started to not feel right. And we were excited because this child, this 4th child, was supposed to be a Christmas baby. His due date was December 25th. But here it was October, and I was having these strange sensations, and things just didn't seem right. And I ended up going to the emergency room in the middle of the night and delivering a baby more than 2 months early. And at first it was all just like a shock. Like, I couldn't believe that it was even happening. And the doctors said they didn't think that the boy was going to live through the night. I won't go into the technical details, but basically my immune system had attacked him in utero, and so the reason why he was premature was because he was already dying inside of the womb. And that first day when he was still alive, I had the faith kick in, I guess, that going on my past experience, everything, works out pretty good. And so if I just pray hard enough and I get everybody to help and support in the prayer movement, that we're going to have a miracle. And that was the hope. And day by day, that hope was looking to be more like it might be becoming a reality. All of the different markers that Max was supposed to meet, he was meeting. So, this blood test was going better, this count was going better, this measurement was going better. And day by day, we were seeing improvement, and I just felt that hope like rise up inside of my heart, saying, this, God has always taken care of me. He's going to take care of me here too. And right about day 16, the doctors came and they said, Mrs. Music, we think that your son might just make it. Everything is starting to look positive. And we were so excited. We were so happy. They were starting to talk about potential days that he might potentially get released to come home from the hospital, because of course all of this time he had been in the NICU. And then they went and they took a scan of his brain, and when the doctor came back with the results, he had the worst news that I didn't want to hear. And he said because of the extreme swelling, they hadn't noticed it before, or they couldn't show the diagnosis, but basically my son was only operating, his bodily functions were only operating because the base of his brain was somewhat functioning, but the rest of his brain was not. Brain is supposed to look like all of the little ridges and valleys, and my son's brain just looked like a pile of mush, like oatmeal. And what the doctor told me was, he's never going to breathe without a ventilator. He's never going to eat. He's never going to be conscious in the way that you want him to. We can artificially keep him alive, but it's not really keeping him alive. He's really only still breathing because machines are making him breathe. And you need to tell us what to do. So basically, the doctors told my husband and myself that we are the ones who would have to decide when our son would die, when we would disconnect the life support. And so 18 days and 7 hours is as long as I had my son Max on this earth. I have a picture right here that is Max after the tubes were removed. So this is one of my only pictures of him where he's not all plugged into all of the machinery and everything. And I will tell you that Max's death was the hardest, most painful, excruciatingly painful experience of my life. Now, there were good things that came out of it, and there's always ways that God turns things that are evil for good, and we'll talk about some of those things later on. But what I want to share with you right now is this was the first time in my life where things didn't turn out the way that I had hoped, where my belief in a miracle didn't happen. And so I had to deal with my own pain, my own grief, my own torment, my own guilt, because I was the one who said what day the life support would be removed. But then also I had to deal with my own feelings towards God. Why did this happen? Why did he die? Why didn't we get the miracle? Why were our hopes raised for those 16 days and then just plummeted and he was dead 3 days later? And as I was struggling with my grief, a few months later, I was in a time of worship, and I was singing that song, Here I Am to Worship, Here I Am to Bow Down. And there's a lyric, a part of that song that says, I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. And when I was singing those words, I'll never know, God stopped me and he spoke to me and he said, Judy, you know better than most, because you know what it feels like to be a parent watching a child die by your own hand. And when God spoke those words to me, and I realized that he was sharing his pain with me, that as he saw Jesus suffer and die on the cross with his permission, even more than his permission, that he is the one who thought it was a good idea, I realized a connection, an intimacy with God on a level that I had never experienced before. So when God shared with me his heart and the pain and suffering of watching Jesus die, I experienced an intimacy in my relationship with God on a level that I had never experienced before. You know, it's really easy to be happy around someone who's happy and to be joyful with them, but somebody doesn't need to be close to you in order to be happy with you. When we share our pain, when we share the difficult times, the hard times, those are the parts of our life where we feel most vulnerable, most unprotected. And those are the times, there's very few people that we want to enter into our pain. And the level of intimacy, the level of trust, the bond of relationship that is established when we are able to share our pain with one another is much more profound than when we're able to share our joy. So as we are going to be talking about suffering and the reason why there's suffering in the world and the potential benefits that suffering provides for us, before all that, what I want you to ponder and meditate on and pray through and talk to God about is when we are experiencing pain, when we are having compassion, which means we are entering into the pain of another person, we are experiencing the heart of God. You know, in discipleship, we always talk about going to the Lord and asking God, Lord, what is your heart towards this person? What is your heart towards this situation? We want to know what God's heart is more than anything else. And for us to know God's heart means we need to know suffering. Because the heart of our Lord God suffers. We don't like using that word suffering, so let me introduce to you the idea that the word compassion, which we all know the Lord is compassionate, full of mercy. That word compassionate, if you look it up in Webster's dictionary, has 3 different components. One of them is suffering with another person. That's what compassion means. Another one is painful sympathy. So when you sympathize with someone and you enter into their pain, you experience that pain with them, you're having compassion. And the third one is when love and sorrow mix together. That is compassion. If we want to be compassionate, if we want to be like our Lord, we have to embrace the pain that comes with suffering. And so I just want to tell you all that I love you. I want nothing more than the best for your life. And I will not be happy when hard things happen in your life. But I do know that there is a place and that God has a purpose. And that as you embrace Him in your suffering, He will embrace you right back. I'll see you all soon.